Tower troops feel a bit odd in Clash Royale nowadays. With the last tower troop being released about 10 months ago, the only way of getting tower troops are from lucky drops. And Supercell recently nerfing tower troops for no good reason. It does kinda feel like Supercell are tossing tower troops to the side. So this just brings up a question. Why? When Supercell teased tower troops back in December of 2023, they made it out to be this huge revolutionary feature. And for the first few months, it seemed like Supercell were going all in on tower troops. But ever since then, it doesn't really seem like Supercell has given too much attention to tower troops. Which is why I will be going over the history of tower troops. Going over when each of them came out, as well as all the balance changes for them. As well as the history of tower troop progression. With some speculation on why Supercell has been doing this to tower troops. And by the end, I will talk about the possible future for tower troops, as well as what I would personally like to see out of tower troops in the future. So without any further ado, let's get started. So as I said, tower troops were announced back in late 2023. Although even then, in the same month, Supercell would release an update that would set the groundwork for tower troops. Just added some UI changes to the shop and decks tab, as well as turned the Tower Princess into its very own card. Although technically, because of this update, Tower Princess could be considered the first ever new tower troop. So I guess we can say 2023 added 2 new cards. But as I said, this update was just laying the groundwork for the first new tower troop releasing the next year. And on January 1st, 2024, the Cannoneer came out. When Cannoneer first came out, he dealt 4 times as much damage as the Princess Tower. To compensate, he attacked 3 times slower, and has lower health than the Princess Tower. And he also had a slightly shorter range. And when Cannoneer first came out, everyone thought he would be really bad. And when Cannoneer first came out, he had a pretty low usage rate. And many people remarked at the time that Cannoneer needed a buff. But looking at all his stats in hindsight, Cannoneer would have been broken if he was released today. First, let me demonstrate it with some interactions. When Cannoneer first came out, people mocked the fact that he couldn't fully counter 3 skeletons at the bridge. But the thing is, Cannoneer could fully counter every other cycle card. In fact, he still has this advantage even today. Another thing people mock Cannoneer for, it is him not being able to fully counter a tombstone. But just like in the cycle card situation, he could fully counter the old furnace, which the Princess Tower couldn't do. He could also fully counter wall breakers, which is something he can't do now. In fact, he can counter a lot of solo and duo cards. While he can still counter most of what I just said today, just the fact he did way more damage on launch makes that version superior. Like yeah, the modern Cannoneer may attack faster and have a slightly longer range, but Cannoneer is a tower troop to counter beatdown. So you would obviously want him to do more damage, because that's what counters the heavy tanks better. I think that was why many people thought Cannoneer was bad at launch. Because people treated him like he was supposed to be an all-rounded tower troop like Princess Tower, when in reality Supercell designed him to counter beatdown. I also think another reason why people dismissed Cannoneer was just because tower troops were so new. Considering no one will truly know how good a card would be until the card comes out. And considering tower troops were this new thing that no one truly knew how to use, it makes sense why everyone thought Cannoneer was so weak. And when they used him in game, they would be underwhelmed because they thought he would act just like a Princess Tower. So I feel like all the slander that Cannoneer got at launch was pretty undeserved. Although just because Cannoneer had potential, most players wouldn't even be able to use that potential. Because now I'm going to talk about how to unlock tower troops back then. Back then, your only way of getting tower troops were from the tower troop chest. You would get these chests from the chest cycle. And depending on your King Tower level, you would either get them every 7 chests in your cycle or every 9 chests in your cycle. Let me just simplify how to get tower troop chests, so I won't have to waste any time explaining to you how the chest cycle works. If you were an active player, you could get one of these chests every 2 to 4 days, and these chests would contain tower troops. Tower troops in plural. That means you could also get Princess Tower cards from them. And considering Cannoneer is an epic rarity tower troop and the Princess is a common rarity tower troop, you may be wondering what the chance of getting Cannoneer from the tower troop chest was. Maybe 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 6? Nah, it was actually 1 in 8. This means that even if you were an active player, you would probably only get Cannoneer 15 days after he came out. Or you could just, you know. And the tower troop chest was the only way to get them. There were no lucky drops in the game, and you couldn't even use wildcards on them. So pretty much if you weren't grinding, you would probably only get Cannoneer a month after he came out. And even then, it would be really hard for you to upgrade him afterwards. I mean, I only got my Cannoneer on my 9th tower troop chest, so Supercell scammed me. So the launch of tower troops were a bit rocky. I mean, we got a pretty underwhelming launch alongside a pretty underwhelming way to unlock him. which was why 9 days later Supercell buffed Cannoneer to have the same range as the Princess Tower. Kinda weird how it wasn't there in the first place, but hey, better late than never. Our next update to Tower Troops would come out 2 months later. On March 18th, 2024, Supercell would allow wildcards on Tower Troops. Weird how we couldn't do that from the start, but hey, better late than never. But Supercell probably wanted Tower Troops to have their own type of wildcard. But because of the poor reception at launch, Supercell probably scrapped a lot of plans for them. This theory is heightened by the fact that you could use the magic coin on Tower Troops at launch. This does show that Tower Troops could use magic items, but we will never know what Supercell was thinking at the time. And April would be sort of the last month where they felt really relevant, because on April 1st, no joke, 2024, Supercell would reveal the Dagger Duchess. An interesting fact about the Dagger Duchess is that she was actually teased in the Cannoneer reveal trailer. And while we didn't see her face, if you zoomed in close enough, you could actually get a glimpse of it. But anyways, back to the actual Tower Troop. Dagger Duchess was the first ever legendary Tower Troop, so what was her legendary ability? Well, her legendary ability was an ammo bar. This bar would signify how many daggers she had. She could only hold 8 daggers and would fire them in rapid succession. Now, she was obviously meant to be a counter to Cycle because of how quickly she attacked. But because she had an ammo bar, Supercell thought they had to compensate for that. But the issue is Supercell went overboard with all of the buffs. First of all, she would be the first and only Tower Troop to have more health than the Princess Tower. Second of all, she would do more damage than the Princess Tower. This was enough extra damage to one-shot spear goblins, on top of the fact that she attacked faster and her daggers moved faster. So with all of these buffs, it would make sense why she would dominate the meta, with a 91% usage rate. So you would expect with such a high usage rate she would get an emergency nerf. But before late 2024, Clash Royale didn't really do emergency balance changes. So we had to wait an entire month just for her to get nerfed. Although it wasn't all doom and gloom, because the Tower Troop chest would actually get buffed. Now you could obviously get Dagger Duchess cards from Tower Troop chests. And if you were extra lucky, you could even get 2. But Supercell would also buff the chances of getting Cannoneer from the Tower Troop chest. And while we don't have exact numbers for this from what I could remember when the Tower Troop chest was still available, Cannoneer would now appear 3 to 4 times per Tower Troop chest, and around the same for Dagger Duchess. Overall, getting Tower Troops now were a lot easier, because not only would you get them more often from Tower Troop chests, you could also spend wildcards on Tower Troops. So the progression side was better, but the balancing side still needed some more work. So finally in May, we got a nerf to Dagger Duchess. This nerf was just a simple health nerf by 14%. She was still quite broken, but she wasn't as ridiculous as before. But Cannoneer would also get nerfed in these balance changes. This shocked many because everyone thought Cannoneer was bad at launch. But before the Dagger Duchess came out, Cannoneer actually had a higher usage rate than the Princess Tower, so him getting a small nerf was sort of deserved. Although this nerf wouldn't change any major interactions. In June, we would get 2 major developments for Tower Troops. The first one was another Dagger Duchess nerf, although this was actually a rework. Her damage would get nerfed so she couldn't anymore one-shot spear goblins, but her hit speed was buffed by 32%. The second development was a brand new Tower Troop, and this Tower Troop was Baby Goblins. Baby Goblins? Yeah, Baby Goblins. Baby Goblins were unlockable in the Goblin Queen's journey. If you don't know what the Goblin Queen's journey is, just imagine a secondary ladder, with its own cards, chests, arenas, and trophy system. And baby goblins were only available in this special ladder mode. So, what did these baby goblins do? Well, they're just a copy of the Princess Tower. Baby goblins do technically have the Goblin Queen ability, but whenever you actually use your ability, the Goblin Queen does it. So I don't really think that was an ability that the baby goblins got. I personally think this was just made to make the baby goblins look more special than they actually were. Although for basic skin, they added in a lot of effort. I mean, it has its own model, animations, attack, card art, and card description. But unfortunately, on October 31st, 2024, Supercell would remove the Goblin Queen's journey. And while the baby goblins would stay in your collection, you wouldn't be able to use them in any other game mode, with Supercell stating that they would stay in your collection for now. But in December of 2024, Supercell would permanently remove baby goblins. This is their explanation why. What, are you expecting me to read it up for you? I think Supercell planned to make the baby goblins into the royal chef. You know, like a goblin chef. But that's just a theory. In July of 2024, Dagger Duchess got 2 hit speed nerfs. This finally turned the card from great to below average, and thus the Princess Tower and Cannoneer's usage rate rose again. While August didn't have any development, September would. In September, Supercell would drop a new update, and that update would rework lucky drops. Lucky drops really worked, so they would give random card stacks and not always magic items. And from these card stacks you could pull tower troops. Although strangely 3-star and 4-star lucky drops wouldn't give you any. And because 1-star lucky drops couldn't give any legendaries, that meant you could only get cannoneers from the 1-star lucky drop. Overall, this was a pretty small progression buff, but a progression buff nonetheless. Honestly, this was probably the best time to get tower troops. The tower troop chest was your main way of getting tower troops. You could use wild cards and tower troops if you weren't patient for tower troop chests. And lucky drops gave out tower troops as a bonus. Honestly, the best time to get tower troops. But in October, Supercell would do something drastic. And this is when I would say the tower troops started to feel more and more de-emphasized. On September 26, 2024, Supercell would announce the work in progress balance changes. This work in progress balance change notably had a cannoneer nerf. This was strange because cannoneer had pretty balanced usage rates, and it didn't really feel like he needed a nerf. But instead of listening to the community about the cannoneer nerf, Supercell doubled down. Not only would cannoneer retain his first nerf, it would also nerf his damage by 4%. While the damage nerf wouldn't change any major interactions, the first hit time nerf would, because now he couldn't fully counter wall breakers. This nerf would put cannoneer in the same spot as Dagger Duchess, which meant the Princess Tower was now the dominant tower troop. This is the moment where I'll say Supercell changed their opinion on tower troops. Previously, it felt like Supercell treated tower troops as competition for the Princess Tower. But after this nerf, it just felt like some optional side thing you could use. And in the coming months, this would be emphasized even more. But the full effects of this would only really happen in early to mid 2025. But as for the rest of 2024, we're still missing one tower troop. On December 16th, 2024, the Royal Chef would be released. And he would be yet another legendary tower troop, but his legendary status was deserved. His legendary ability was... and these pancakes would give extra levels. Now before the Royal Chef came out, he could cook one pancake every 15 seconds. This means he could potentially cook 20 pancakes per game. Now that's a lot of pancakes. He could also give a pancake when a card had more than 20% HP, and he could even cook a pancake when the tower was down. So you may be wondering, with a tower troop giving extra levels, what were his disadvantages? Well, he would have a few hundred less health than the Princess Tower, and attack 0.1 seconds slower. And his 0.1 slower attack speed would barely change any interactions, other than Mega Minion and Barbarian Barrel getting an extra hit on the tower. So pretty much you would get at least 6 free levels for practically the same stats as the Princess Tower. Now luckily Supercell would nerf him before he came out. His shortest cook time would get increased by 3 seconds, his maximum cook time would get increased by 5 seconds, his HP would go from 2,834 to 2,616 at tournament standard, and he could only cook 7 seconds after the match started. Overall, while he would be quite good, he wouldn't break the meta, and when he first came out he had about the same usage rate as the Princess Tower. This did indicate that he needed a nerf. Now in my opinion, I didn't really think the Royal Chef needed that big of a nerf. The main reason why was because the meta we had was a beatdown meta. And considering the top 2 finishing decks ran a beatdown deck with Royal Chef sort of proves my point. So I feel like a small hit speed nerf or a small health nerf was deserved. But I'll go over how Supercell balanced him later. So now it's January 2025 and Supercell just dropped a new set of balance changes. In these balance changes, Dagger Duchess would get a buff. She was initially gonna get a 9th dagger, as well as her daggers reaching the target quicker, but in the final balance changes they removed the 9th dagger. Now after this buff, Dagger Duchess was actually doing pretty well, and it seemed like Supercell were aiming to make all tower troops just as good as Princess Tower, but this optimism would be demolished just the next month. On February 4th, 2025, Supercell would do a massive nerf to the Royal Chef. He now cooks pancakes way slower, his hit speed and hit time would get increased by 0.1 seconds. He could only give a buff to a card if it had 33% or more of its health, and when a tower was taken down, the cook speed was reduced. That is in total 6 nerfs. Yeah, after this balance change, Royal Chef was cooked. And it didn't help that every strong beatdown card in the balance changes would be nerfed, thus killing the beatdown meta. So with a massive direct nerf and many indirect nerfs, it was no surprise that he got a 3% usage rate with a really low win rate. Now luckily they would partially reverse his cook time in the March balance changes, but he was still quite bad after the small buff. On March 31st, 2025, Supercell would drop a new update. And in this update, Supercell would remove the chest cycle. And the only way you could get tower troop chests were from the chest cycle. So pretty much with Supercell wiping the chest cycle, they also wiped the entire progression source for tower troops. Now you could only get tower troops from lucky drops. Now Supercell did update 3-star lucky drops to contain tower troops, but Supercell doing this was pretty much like putting a piece of tape on a massive crack. Like, yeah, it won't solve the underlying problem, but some support is better than no support. This pretty much made it impossible for people to unlock tower troops, which just contributed to the feeling that Supercell didn't care about tower troops anymore. And this feeling would get heightened even more in the following months. In the April balance changes, Supercell would be nerfing Dagger Duchess. This was kinda deserved because she did have a decently high usage rate, but I thought the main reason why was because of lack of competition. But as I've said, Supercell doesn't really care about tower troops at this point. Plus, it was a small nerf that wouldn't change any interactions, so I guess it was kinda deserved. But this nerf dropped the Dagger Duchess usage rate by a lot, so I don't really think it was that good of a balance change. Now in May, Supercell would buff Royal Chef's HP by 8%. Yet again, this barely helped the card, but a buff is still a buff. As for June, while we would get an update, we wouldn't get any update content for tower troops. This is weird because every update has had at least a small update to tower troops, and this was the first one to have nothing. There'd also be no balance changes in June and July, which was kinda odd because Supercell had been on a streak of balance changes. But in the August balance changes, Supercell would do something weird, because Supercell would nerf every tower troop. This was weird because the usage rate was already quite low, so why nerf them even more? Just felt really unneeded. Now to be fair, Cannoneer would actually get a rework, but this rework felt more like a buff. Which is weird because the intention was obviously to make it a nerf, because he would still do enough damage to one-shot a lot of cards, and because he attacked a lot quicker, he would have a way easier time taking down swarms. This in turn made Cannoneer quite popular, especially to counter the new reworked furnace. But of course, tower troops are not allowed to have nice things. So in the most recent September balance changes, Cannoneer would now attack 0.1 seconds slower, and thus his usage rate fell back down again, coupled with the evolved furnace also getting nerfed. As for tower troops usage rate in September 24th, 2025, in the top 200, the Princess Tower comes in first place with a 65% usage rate. At second place, we got the Royal Chef with a 25% usage rate. At third place, we got the Cannoneer with a 9% usage rate. And finally, we've got Dagger Duchess with a 1% usage rate, with the lowest win rate out of the rest. So overall, other than the Royal Chef, every other tower troop is pretty bad. Overall, looking at the entire history of tower troops, I feel like most balance changes were pretty one-sided. Now what do I mean by this? Pretty much whenever a tower troop gets nerfed, it's usually a response to how the meta has changed. Like Royal Chef getting nerfed as a response for the evolved P.E.K.K.A. and evolved Goblin Giant meta. Or Cannoneer getting nerfed because of the furnace. But once the meta is toned down or dead, the tower troop will still be in the same state, thus putting them in a mediocre position. I'm telling you, once this heavy beatdown meta that got facilitated by the evolved baby dragon is over, the Royal Chef is done for. Future me here? Most of the recording in this video was done at around mid-September, so I wouldn't have known that in October Royal Chef would have gotten yet another nerf, and the nerf he's getting is a health nerf of 7%. Now considering most of the good beatdown cards are also getting nerfed in this set of balance changes, you can see a lot of parallels between the most recent October balance changes to the old February balance changes. Although we only know the work in progress balance changes of this recording, so we won't yet know if there will come any changes. Although yet again, just like his March to May state, he'll probably hit his all-time low again. But anyways, back to the actual video. Another main reason why tower troops just don't feel as relevant is lack of competition. The Princess Tower is the standard, so I can understand why she would have something like a 40% usage rate. So the other tower troops right now should have around a 20% usage rate. But most of the time, these tower troops don't even hit a 10% usage rate. And when they do get over a 25% usage rate, it's usually because of a meta shift. And even if they got there because of the buff Supercell gave them, they will still get nerfed in about 1 or 3 months, instead of buffing the other tower troops, which would naturally decrease the usage. But there's a final reason why Supercell could be hesitant on buffing or adding new tower troops, and that is rock paper scissors. No joke. Tower troops would sort of lead to a rock paper scissors effect. While some decks could be really good against other tower troops, while some tower troops may be a hard counter to other decks, the tower troop on that tower could make or break the match, and that creates a rock paper scissors effect. But this sort of mentality shared by content creators is a bit weird to me, because you could also put the same mentality on decks. Some decks hard counter other decks, or none of you really have an advantage. Decks pretty much have the same effect as tower troops. But I feel like the thing that knocks tower troops down even more, it is that a single tower troop can be more meta defining than a single card. But that's why I feel like Princess Tower being a standard is a good thing. Because her being the standard will ensure no one archetype will be better than the other. Because if we took the tower troop that hard counters beat down as the standard, then Psycho would be broken. If we took the tower troop that hard counters Psycho as the standard, then beatdown would be broken. Which is why I feel like the Princess Tower is a great middle ground as the standard. But because Supercell doesn't get tower troop balancing right, Princess Tower will usually have over a 60% usage rate. Which is personally why I feel like tower troops are being de-emphasized. But this is all just speculation, because Supercell hasn't stated what they want out of tower troops. So what do I think the future of tower troops will be? Well, I personally think Supercell will not add any new tower troops. Considering the last tower troop was added last year, I highly doubt we'll see any new ones. I also personally think Supercell are not going to balance tower troops as much anymore, and they will only balance them when it's necessary. As for the progression of tower troops, I actually think Supercell are looking to make it better. They could start to integrate tower troops into regular chests, challenges, clan wars, or even giving them their own mastery track. Considering the new clan voyage event, which by the time you're gonna watch this is already over, it's a tower troop chest at the end, sort of tells me that they may integrate tower troop progression into clan wars. As for what I would like to see from tower troops, I would personally like to see Supercell adding way more new tower troops. I would personally like to see more offensive tower troops, more tower troops that are good at countering beatdown or cycle, a rare tower troop, or even some standard tower troops, like the Princess Tower. I feel like Supercell has just scratched the surface of ideas for tower troops, and I would like to see them add more. As for the balancing of them, I already brushed on this a little bit, but I'd like to see the current tower troops have about a 20% usage rate. I think they can do this by buffing all tower troops bit by bit, until they get to about a 20% usage rate. And as for unlocking them, I already talked about this in the short I made, but I think it would be really cool if they added tower troops to merge tactics. Instead of unlocking them from the arenas, you could unlock them from merge tactics. And they could even make it so tower troops became their own rulers, giving them more of a purpose in the overall game. Plus, Merge Tactics just has this royal feeling. I mean, the only arena you can play Merge Tactics in is Royal Arena. And considering all tower troops are a part of the King's family tree, it would then make sense that you'd unlock them in the most royal part of the game. So I think making Merge Tactics the main area where you can get tower troops is a great idea. As I've said, I already got a short about this topic, so if you want more details or even more suggestions for better Merge Tactics rewards, you can watch that short. I personally feel like tower troops are a great addition to Clash Royale, because it brings way more strategy and also brings a lot of diversity, because it's kind of boring to see the same tower troop on the tower over and over again. So tower troops being added to subside this repetition was a great idea in my opinion. But what are your thoughts on tower troops? Do you have the same opinion as me? Do you feel like Supercell should have never added them and they're perfect the way they are? Or do you personally not care about tower troops? If you want a better explanation on how Cannoneer, Dagger Duchess, and Royal Chef worked at launch, I recommend you to watch Abdod's or Abdod, I don't know, nutshell videos on Dagger Duchess and Royal Chef. And as for Cannoneer, OJ's how-to video on Cannoneer was a perfect embodiment of how everyone felt about Cannoneer at the time. So go and watch those if you want a deeper dive. But with that, thanks for watching this video and I'll see you guys next time. Talker, CR, and BS.